The massive alien ship cut through Earth's blue sky like a silver knife, its hull gleaming with technology humanity could barely understand. Inside the control room, Senior Assessor Vexthul stood 8 feet tall, his crystal-like skin catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. His eyes, cold as winter stars, scanned through thousands of human stories displayed on floating screens around him. "Look at this nonsense," he said to his assistant, shaking his head. Zinara floated nearby, her forearms moving like a graceful dance as she operated multiple control panels at once. These humans actually believed in dragons breathing fire, people turning into wolves and gods throwing lightning bolts from the sky. How did such a backward species even survive long enough to discover space travel? Zinara's laugh sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "At least they're entertaining. My favorite is this story about a man who gets stronger when he's angry and turns green. Primitive minds create such amusing fantasies when they can't understand the world around them." Down on Earth's surface, Dr. Jiho Park wiped sweat from his forehead as he watched the alien vessel approach the landing pad. He had spent years preparing for this moment, humanity's first official contact with the Galactic Confederation. Beside him, Dr. Mina Kim checked her translation device for the 100th time, her hands trembling slightly. "Remember," Jiho whispered to her, "we represent all of humanity today. These beings will decide if we're worthy to join their galactic community." The ship landed with barely a whisper, its advanced technology making the touchdown smoother than a feather touching water. Steam hissed from cooling vents as a ramp extended toward the ground. Jiho straightened his best suit and put on his most diplomatic smile. Vexthul emerged first, his crystalline features catching the afternoon sunlight, like a living prism. Behind him came Zinara and 3 other alien assessors, each more strange and wonderful than the last. Their technology hummed with quiet power, making the air itself seem to vibrate with energy. "Welcome to Earth," Jiho said, stepping forward, with his hand extended in the universal gesture of peace. "We are deeply honored by your presence here today." The lead alien's translation device buzzed for a moment before converting his response into perfect Korean. "I am Senior Assessor Vexthul of the Galactic Confederation. We are here to evaluate your species for potential membership. This process will involve a complete analysis of your cultural development, technological capabilities, and social structures." Mina stepped forward, gesturing toward a series of floating displays that showed humanity's greatest stories, tales of heroes and monsters, gods, and legends that had inspired people for thousands of years. These stories are incredibly important to us. They represent our hopes, our fears, and our deepest understanding of what it means to be human. But before she could continue, Zinara interrupted with what sounded like barely contained laughter. "Mythological constructs," she said, her tone suggesting she was talking to a small child. "We've seen this pattern on hundreds of worlds. Species that haven't yet developed interstellar travel always create these elaborate fantasy stories to explain things they don't understand." She gestured dismissively at the displays showing dragons soaring through clouds, mighty warriors wielding impossible weapons, and wise wizards commanding the forces of nature. Fire-breathing reptiles, humans with magical powers, beings that can bend reality to their will. It's all quite charming in a primitive sort of way. Your minds created these stories because you were afraid of the dark, afraid of death, afraid of forces beyond your control. Vexthul nodded approvingly. Every pre-spaceflight civilization goes through this phase. Once you develop proper scientific understanding, these childish fantasies will naturally fade away. Consider it part of growing up as a species. Jiho felt his heart sink as he watched the aliens dismiss thousands of years of human culture and wisdom as nothing more than the frightened imaginings of primitive minds. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were the foundation of human civilization, the source of their greatest values and deepest truths. But the aliens had already moved on, their scanning devices humming as they began their formal assessment of humanity's worthiness to join the stars. 3 weeks had passed since the aliens arrived, and their massive research facility now dominated the Seoul skyline like a gleaming metal mountain. Inside, holographic displays showed thousands upon Thousands of human stories, every myth, legend, and folktale the aliens could find. They had worked day and night, cataloguing humanity's greatest treasures like specimens in a laboratory. Vexthal stood before a shimmering holographic screen that connected him to the Galactic Confederation Council, a gathering of the most powerful beings in known space. Representatives from dozens of alien species watched him through the cosmic video call, their strange forms flickering in the blue light. "My fellow council members," Vexthal began, his crystalline skin reflecting the data streams around him, "I present my preliminary findings on the human species of Terrasol 3. He gestured to the floating displays that showed dragons breathing fire, warriors fighting with glowing swords, and wizards casting spells. As expected, this species follows the standard pattern we've observed on over 300 primitive worlds. The alien council members responded with their various forms of laughter. Some chittered like insects, others hummed in harmonious vibrations, and a few flashed bright colors across their bioluminescent skin. To them, human stories were nothing more than amusing curiosities. "Notice the recurring themes," Vexthal continued, clearly enjoying his presentation. "Shape-shifting creatures that transform from human to beast, immortal warriors who cannot die no matter how many battles they fight, and godlike beings who can manipulate the very fabric of reality with a thought. All classic examples of primitive fear, responses to a dangerous environment." One council member, whose translated voice sounded like bubbling water, asked, "Have you identified the root causes of these particular delusions?" "Absolutely," Vexthal replied with confidence. "Large predators like saber-toothed cats created the dragon myths. Natural disasters like earthquakes and volcanoes became angry gods. Disease and death spawned stories of immortal heroes who could overcome any challenge. It's all perfectly predictable psychological development." In the corner of the research facility, Dr. Sujin Lee watched the presentation with growing discomfort. As Korea's leading expert on traditional stories and cultural heritage, she had been invited to help the aliens understand human mythology. But instead of respect for her people's wisdom, she saw only mockery and dismissal. Morgan, the team's lead linguist whose tentacle-like appendages allowed him to operate multiple translation devices simultaneously, raised an interesting point. "The geographical consistency is quite remarkable," he noted, his electronic voice buzzing with curiosity. "These dragon entities appear in European folklore, Asian legends, Native American traditions, and African myths. Despite these cultures being separated by vast oceans and having no contact with each other for thousands of years, their descriptions are incredibly similar." Sujin leaned forward, hoping this observation might lead to deeper understanding. But Vexthal waved dismissively, his crystalline fingers catching the light. "Simple evolutionary psychology," he explained to the council. "Humans evolved from the same basic stock and faced similar environmental pressures worldwide. Large flying predators existed on every continent, so naturally every culture developed similar dragon myths. The consistency proves these are genetic, fear responses, not actual historical events." The council members made more sounds of amusement, clearly satisfied with this explanation. One being that looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed with bright colors as it laughed. "Primitive minds think so literally," it said through its translator. "They see a large bird or flying reptile and imagine it breathing fire and hoarding treasure." As the presentation continued, Sujin felt a growing unease in her stomach. These stories weren't just random fantasies. They were the foundation of human civilization, passed down through countless generations with careful precision. Her own grandmother had told her these tales with such vivid detail that they felt more real than reality itself. That evening, after the aliens had finished their daily mockery session, Sujin drove through Seoul's busy streets to visit her grandmother. Halmoni Yoon lived in a traditional hanok house, one of the few remaining wooden structures in the modern city. The old building seemed to whisper with ancient secrets as Sujin approached. She found her 89-year-old grandmother sitting in the courtyard, staring at the stars with unusual intensity. For weeks now, Halmoni Yoon had been acting strangely, speaking in languages that sounded familiar, but that Sujin couldn't identify. And sometimes her eyes would flash with an inner light that seemed impossible for a human being. "Grandmother," Sujin said softly, kneeling beside the elderly woman. "Are you feeling all right?" Halmoni Yoon turned toward her, and for a moment her eyes blazed with that strange inner fire. Her grip on Sujin's hand was surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "They don't understand, child," she whispered urgently, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. "The Watchers are stirring in their sleep. The old agreements that have kept the world safe, they're coming to an end." The alien scanning equipment had been working around the clock, sending invisible beams of energy across Earth's surface to map every inch of the planet. But in the fourth week of their assessment, something strange began to happen. The machines started picking up readings that made no sense, energy signatures that shouldn't exist anywhere in the known universe. At Stonehenge, the ancient circle, of standing stones in England, the alien sensors detected quantum fluctuations that bent the laws of physics. The massive rocks weren't just sitting there quietly like they had for thousands of years. They were humming with power, creating ripples in space-time itself that made the aliens' most advanced instruments scream with warning alarms. Halfway, across the world, the Great Pyramids of Giza showed even stranger readings. The alien scanners detected what could only be described as dimensional fractures, tiny tears in reality itself that seemed to lead somewhere else entirely. The pyramid's internal chambers pulsed with energy patterns that matched no known natural phenomenon in the galaxy. Mount Baekdu, the sacred mountain on the border between North Korea and China, registered gravitational anomalies that defied everything the aliens thought they knew about physics. The mountain itself seemed to be heavier than it should be, as if something massive was hidden deep beneath its rocky surface, something so dense it was actually warping the fabric of space around it. Back in the Seoul research facility, Vex Thule stared at the incoming data with growing confusion. His crystalline skin flickered with nervous energy as he tried to make sense of the readings. "These must be natural phenomena," he announced to his team, though his voice carried less confidence than usual. "Unusual mineral deposits, underground. Gas pockets, magnetic field variations. There has to be a scientific explanation." Dr. Jiho Park, who had been quietly studying the data alongside the aliens, looked up from his tablet with concern written across his face. "These aren't random locations," he said, his finger tracing patterns on the holographic display. "Look at this. Every single energy anomaly corresponds exactly to sites mentioned in our oldest myths and legends. Stonehenge appears in Celtic dragon stories. The pyramids are connected to tales of sleeping gods, and Mount Baekdu is where Korean legends say the first divine beings touched the earth." Xenara's forearms moved dismissively through the air, her tone as cold as winter wind. "Confirmation bias," she replied, though she couldn't quite hide the uncertainty in her voice. "You're looking for patterns that don't actually exist. Humans built their mythological sites near natural energy sources because they could sense something unusual, then created stories to explain what they didn't understand. But the readings kept getting stronger and stranger. Ancient sites across the globe began showing similar anomalies. Machu Picchu in Peru, Angkor Wat in Cambodia, the Easter Island statues, Aboriginal sacred sites in Australia. Every place that human legends claimed was touched by magic or visited by gods was now glowing like a beacon on the aliens' scanning equipment. Meanwhile, in her traditional Hanok house, Halmoni Yoon's condition was rapidly getting worse. Her granddaughter Sujin visited every day, watching in growing alarm as the elderly woman's behavior became more erratic and impossible to explain. The old woman would sit perfectly still for hours, then suddenly begin speaking in languages that sounded ancient beyond measure. Dr. Hyunwoo Nam, a linguistics professor from Seoul National University, had come to record her words, hoping to identify the mysterious languages she was using. "She's speaking perfect ancient Sumerian," he whispered to Sujin in amazement, holding up his recording device. "This is a language that died out 4,000 years ago, and she's using grammatical structures that we've only recently discovered in archaeological digs." But as soon as he tried to record her words, the equipment began malfunctioning. The sounds that came out weren't just strange, they were physically painful to hear, causing headaches and nausea in anyone who listened for more than a few seconds. Then, Halmoni Yoon switched languages again, speaking in what sounded like Proto-Germanic, then something even older that Dr. Nam couldn't identify at all. The words seemed to carry their own weight, making the air in the room feel thick and heavy. Suddenly she looked directly at Sujin and spoke in clear, modern Korean, though her voice carried harmonics that no human throat should be able to produce. "The sleepers wake," she said, her eyes blazing with that impossible inner light. "The compact ends when strangers judge us wanting." Sujin knelt beside her grandmother, desperate for answers. "What compact? What sleepers? Grandmother, please, help me understand what's happening." But the old woman's lucid moments were becoming shorter and rarer. During one brief period of clarity, she pressed an ancient leather journal into Sujin's trembling hands. The book felt warm to the touch, and its pages seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the traditional Korean room. "When the time comes, child," Halmoni Yoon whispered, her voice fading like smoke, "you'll understand everything. We've been guardians for so long, protectors and keepers of secrets, not guardians of myths and stories, but guardians of sleeping truths that the world isn't ready to face." The journal pulsed with warmth in Sujin's hands as her grandmother's eyes closed, leaving her alone with questions that seemed to grow more frightening with each passing day. The morning mist hung low over Loch Ness as the alien research team set up their equipment along the rocky shoreline. To Vexthul and his colleagues, this was just another routine day of documenting what they called primitive water creature mythology. The Scottish lake stretched out before them like a dark mirror, its depths hiding secrets that had inspired human stories for centuries. According to local folklore, Dr. Mina Kim explained as she watched the aliens deploy their scanning devices, this lake is home to a creature they call Nessie, a massive serpent-like being that has been spotted by witnesses for over 1,000 years. Zinara's forearms worked efficiently to lower sensor arrays into the murky water while she spoke with barely contained amusement. "Yes, we've reviewed the reports. Typical lake monster mythology, probably inspired by floating logs, unusual, wave patterns or large fish seen from a distance. The human imagination does love to turn ordinary things into monsters." Krulex, the team's xenobiologist whose 6 insect-like eyes could see across multiple spectrums of light, monitored the readings on his advanced equipment. His species had catalogued life forms across hundreds of worlds, and he was confident that Earth's primitive ecosystem held no surprises for someone of his expertise. "The water is approximately 200 meters deep at its maximum point," he reported, his voice buzzing with the mechanical precision of his translator. "Standard freshwater composition, normal temperature gradients, no unusual biological signatures detected. Whatever the humans think they've been seeing, it's certainly not a living creature of significant size." The alien scanning equipment hummed quietly as it sent invisible beams of energy deep into the lake's dark waters. These devices could detect the heartbeat of a small fish from miles away, analyze the genetic composition of microscopic organisms, and map every grain of sediment on the lake bottom. If anything larger than a minnow lived in these waters, they would find it. For 3 hours, the scans continued without incident. Vexthul reviewed the data with growing satisfaction, already composing his report about another human myth successfully, debunked by superior alien science. The reading showed exactly what he expected: a normal lake with normal fish, nothing more extraordinary than a few schools of salmon and some bottom-feeding creatures. Then, at exactly 3:47 p.m., every single piece of equipment simultaneously exploded with warning alarms. "Massive biosignature detected," Krulex shouted, his 6 eyes widening in shock as data streams flooded his displays. "Length approximately 120 meters, depth 200 meters, moving at speeds that should be impossible for any aquatic creature of that size." The water in the center of the lake began to churn and bubble as if something enormous was rising from the depths. Waves spread outward in perfect circles, growing larger and more violent with each passing second. The alien equipment, designed to function flawlessly in any environment, began sparking and smoking as energy readings spiked beyond all known parameters. Then, the water erupted. What emerged from Loch Ness defied every classification system in the galactic database. The creature possessed the serpentine grace of ancient legend, but its movements showed an intelligence that blazed in eyes older than human civilization. Its massive body, covered in scales that shifted color like living metal, rose from the lake with the majesty of a living mountain. The creature's very presence generated electromagnetic fields so powerful that they instantly shorted out every piece of alien technology within a half-mile radius. But more disturbing than the equipment failures was the effect the creature had on the aliens themselves. Their advanced nervous systems, evolved across different worlds and environments, all triggered the same primal terror response, as if their genetic memory recognized this being as the ultimate predator. Vexthul's crystalline skin went completely transparent with fear, while Zinara's forearms trembled uncontrollably. Krollex made a sound that his translator couldn't process, a noise of pure instinctive terror that needed no translation across species barriers. The creature's ancient gaze swept slowly across the assembled team, and in those moments, each alien felt as if they were being judged by something infinitely older and wiser than their entire civilization. When those powerful eyes turned toward Dr. Mina Kim, something passed between human and creature. A moment of recognition, perhaps, or acknowledgement of some connection that the aliens couldn't understand. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature slipped back beneath the dark waters, leaving only expanding ripples and the sharp electric smell of ozone hanging in the air. For long minutes, nobody moved or spoke. The silence was broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the crackling of ruined electronic equipment. "Hallucination," Vexthul finally declared, though his voice shook and his hands trembled as he tried unsuccessfully to restart his scanning devices. Mass psychological event triggered by unusual atmospheric conditions, swamp gas perhaps, or some kind of natural electromagnetic phenomenon. But Krollex had managed to record something in those brief moments. Before his equipment failed, a pheromone signature unlike anything in the galactic database. The chemical signature was designed to trigger fear responses, not just in Earth creatures, but in life forms from dozens of different worlds, as if this ancient being had somehow evolved to be recognized as a predator by species that had never shared its planet. That night, as the shaken alien team tried to rationalize what they'd witnessed, local villagers reported seeing impossible things moving through the mist around the lake, shapes that belonged in legends and nightmares, not in the modern world. The sun had barely risen over Seoul when Sujin made her way to her grandmother's traditional Hanok house, her heart heavy with worry. For 7 weeks now, ever since the aliens had arrived on Earth, Halmoni Yoon's condition had steadily worsened. The old woman who had raised her with gentle hands and warm stories had become someone, or something, entirely different. As Sujin approached the wooden house, she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. The air around the building seemed to shimmer and dance, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, except the morning was cool and crisp. The very atmosphere felt charged with energy, as if lightning was about to strike. She found her grandmother sitting in the center of the traditional Korean courtyard, positioned in perfect lotus pose with her legs crossed and her back straight, as a sword. Halmoni Yoon's eyes were closed, but her entire body seemed to glow with a faint, impossible light that made Sujin's eyes water when she tried to look directly at it. "Grandmother," Sujin called softly, approaching with careful steps. The wooden floor beneath her feet vibrated with a low rhythmic humming that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. The old woman's eyes opened, and Sujin gasped in shock. Instead of the familiar brown eyes she had known all her life, Halmoni Yoon's gaze blazed with inner fire, a brilliant golden light that seemed to contain the warmth of 1,000 suns. When Sujin tried to meet that gaze directly, her vision blurred and tears streamed down her cheeks. "Listen carefully, my child," the woman said, and Sujin's world turned upside down. The voice that emerged was not her grandmother's gentle Korean accent, but perfect English spoken with the crisp pronunciation of someone who had spent decades in Western universities. "There isn't much time left before everything changes." Sujin staggered backward, her mind reeling with confusion and disbelief. Her grandmother had never spoken a word of English in her entire life. She had been born in a small Korean village, and had never traveled beyond the borders of her homeland. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez," the woman continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Sujin's bones. "I am the 89th keeper of the Compact, holder of the Eastern Gate, and guardian of sleeping powers that existed long before human civilization began." As she spoke, Halmoni Yoon's familiar form began to flicker and shift, like a television screen, with poor reception. For brief moments, Sujin caught glimpses of something else, a being of pure light and energy that wore her grandmother's appearance like a comfortable disguise. The true form was vast and luminous, radiating power that made the air itself seem to sing with ancient music. "The beings that the aliens dismiss as myths and legends," Elena explained, her voice growing stronger with each word. "They are not imaginary creatures born from human fear and ignorance. They are our partners, our ancient allies who have been sleeping in hidden places across the world, waiting until humanity needed them or faced a threat too great to handle alone." The traditional wooden walls of the Hanok house began to vibrate with a deep thrumming sound that seemed to emerge from the very heart of the earth. Picture frames rattled on their hooks, and the ceramic teacups on the low table chimed like gentle bells. The resonance felt alive, as if the planet itself was waking up from a long, peaceful sleep. "The alien visitors' judgment of our so-called primitive nature has triggered something they cannot possibly understand," Elena continued, her human appearance growing more translucent with each passing moment. "We are not humanity's newest members desperately seeking approval to join some galactic community. We are the guardians and protectors of this world's greatest secrets, and the Confederation has just insulted powers that were shaping entire galaxies before their species even learned to make fire." As her transformed grandmother spoke these words, Sujin felt something stirring deep within her own chest, a warmth that spread through her veins like liquid starlight. It was as if a door had been opened in her mind, revealing knowledge and memories that had been hidden in her bloodline for countless generations. She was part of something ancient and magnificent, connected to a heritage that stretched back to the very beginning of human history. "The compact that has kept these powers sleeping for thousands of years is finally coming to an end," Elena whispered, her voice now barely audible as her human form continued to fade like morning mist. "The agreements made in the distant past, the promises and oaths that have protected humanity's childhood, they are all being broken by the aliens' arrogance and dismissal." The golden light in her eyes pulsed one final time, bright enough to illuminate the entire courtyard like a miniature sun. "And now," she said with a smile that contained both infinite love and terrible power, "they're all waking up." The morning started like any other across planet Earth, but within hours everything humanity thought they knew about reality came crashing down. What had been sleeping for thousands of years was finally waking up, and the world would never be the same again. In the rugged mountains of Wales, hikers and sheep farmers noticed something strange happening to the ancient peaks. The sky began to darken, not with clouds, but with something far more impossible. From the highest mountain ridge, something vast and magnificent stretched wings that were so enormous they blocked out the sun itself. The shadow that fell across the Welsh countryside wasn't cast by any airplane or weather phenomenon. It belonged to a dragon. The creature that emerged from its mountain lair was everything the old stories had promised and more. Its scales gleamed like polished emeralds in the filtered sunlight, and its eyes burned with intelligence older than human civilization. When it spread its wings fully, they measured nearly a quarter-mile from tip to tip, creating wind currents that could be felt for dozens of miles in every direction. Radar stations across Europe went crazy as their equipment tried to track something that moved at impossible speeds. The Dragon's flight generated heat signatures that matched no known aircraft in any military database. Scientists stared at their monitors in disbelief as the readings showed speeds that should have torn any living creature apart. Yet the Dragon moved through the air with graceful ease that defied every law of physics. When the Dragon finally roared, the sound was unlike anything heard on Earth in recorded history. The roar didn't just travel through the air, it created actual gravitational waves that rippled through space itself. The alien Confederation fleet, orbiting Earth, was rocked by forces they couldn't understand, their massive ships swaying like leaves in a hurricane. Seismic monitoring stations across 3 continents registered the Dragon's call as if it were a major earthquake, though no ground had moved. Meanwhile, in Greece, Mount Olympus began to show activity that had nothing to do with volcanic eruptions. Instead of lava and ash, the ancient mountain erupted with beings made of pure lightning and storm clouds. Zeus himself stepped from thunderclouds that formed spontaneously around his towering presence, his body crackling with electrical energy that made the air itself sing with power. Every step the Greek god took generated electromagnetic pulses, strong enough to disable satellites orbiting hundreds of miles above. The aurora borealis, normally visible only near the Earth's poles, suddenly blazed across the Mediterranean sky in broad daylight, painting the afternoon heavens with ribbons of green and gold light that danced to the rhythm of Zeus's heartbeat. Halfway, around the world in the dense rainforests of the Amazon, an even stranger awakening was taking place. Trees that had stood motionless for millennia began to move, their massive trunks swaying without any wind to disturb them. But these weren't ordinary trees affected by some natural phenomenon. They were ancient guardians that had been sleeping, in plain sight, disguised as part of the forest itself. The wooden camouflage fell away like shed skin, revealing humanoid forms 40 feet tall with bark-like skin that pulsed with green energy. Their eyes blazed like emerald stars, and when they took their first steps in thousands of years, the very ground trembled beneath their weight. Environmental monitoring stations throughout South America went haywire as oxygen production spiked to impossible levels and electromagnetic readings showed activity that shouldn't exist in nature. In the frozen lands of the far north, beneath glaciers that had covered the landscape for countless ages, the Norse gods stirred in their hidden halls. Their awakening caused ice ages to retreat and advance in localized areas, creating pockets of tropical warmth in the middle of Arctic wastelands. Thor's hammer strikes against his own palm generated thunder so powerful it could be heard by astronauts. In orbit, while the legendary Rainbow Bridge manifested as an actual construct of crystallized light that spanned entire continents. High above Earth, aboard the Confederation flagship, Vexthal watched his instruments with growing horror. Every weapon system designed to protect his fleet was failing. Shield generators that could deflect asteroid impacts were overloading and shutting down. Navigation computers that had guided ships across galaxies were showing readings that suggested reality itself was becoming unstable in Earth's vicinity. "This is completely impossible," he whispered to his crew, his crystalline skin beginning to crack under the stress. "These energy readings are off every scale we've ever developed. They exceed our most advanced technology by levels that shouldn't be achievable by any known civilization." But the most terrifying moment came when all the awakening entities, dragons soaring through storm clouds, gods striding across continents, and forest guardians stretching after their long sleep, turned their ancient gazes upward toward the alien fleet. When their combined attention focused on the Confederation ships, the hull plating began to resonate with frequencies that were physically painful to perceive, causing every alien aboard to clutch their heads in agony as reality itself seemed to bend around Earth's newly awakened guardians. The United Nations building had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. Emergency sessions had been called before during global crises, but never had the building itself been reinforced with alien technology just to keep the walls from cracking under the weight of reality-bending forces. The conference room buzzed, with failing equipment as world leaders and alien dignitaries gathered around tables that trembled with each pulse of energy from the awakening entities outside. Sujin walked to the center of the assembly, her footsteps echoing strangely in the charged air. Where once stood a quiet Korean ethnologist who studied old stories for a living, now stood someone transformed. Her eyes carried the same golden fire that had blazed in her grandmother's gaze, and when she spoke, her voice resonated with harmonics that seemed to come from the earth itself. "You want to know the real truth about human mythology?" she asked, addressing the stunned faces of presidents, prime ministers, and alien assessors who had spent weeks dismissing her people's greatest treasures. "Then I suggest you listen very Carefully, because what I'm about to tell you concerns not just Earth, but every civilization in this galaxy. The room fell silent, except for the crackling of overloaded electronics. Even Vexthul, whose crystalline features had grown increasingly fractured from stress, leaned forward with desperate attention. Sujin raised her hand, and holographic displays materialized around the room, not generated by alien technology, but manifesting from her own inherited power. The images they showed weren't the sanitized version of Earth's history found in textbooks, but the true record preserved in bloodlines like hers for 50,000 years. This world was once a battleground, she began, her voice carrying the weight of millennia, not between primitive tribes fighting over resources, but between beings of cosmic power whose very existence threatened the fabric of reality itself. Dragons that could breathe fire hot enough to ignite stars. Gods who manipulated the fundamental forces that hold the universe together. Entities that existed partially outside conventional space-time, able to step between dimensions as easily as walking through a doorway. The holographic displays showed scenes that made the assembled viewers gasp in awe and terror. Battles that raged across continents, with beings so powerful their conflicts created new mountain ranges and carved out ocean basins. Dragons whose roars shattered moons. Gods whose anger caused supernovas in distant star systems. Vexthul's translator began making confused buzzing sounds as it struggled to process concepts that had no equivalent in any known galactic language. How do you translate the idea of beings that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously? How do you explain entities that can rewrite the laws of physics with a thought? When their ancient war threatened to destroy not just Earth, but tear holes. In local space-time itself, Sujin continued, these cosmic powers made a decision that saved countless lives across multiple star systems. They agreed to enter into stasis, a sleep so deep it was almost like death, becoming part of the very world they had nearly destroyed. The displays shifted to show the moment of the Great Compact, beings of impossible power, voluntarily surrendering their consciousness to become mountains, forests, lakes, and hidden places across the globe. They gave up their active existence to allow a young species called humanity to inherit the surface world. We became their guardians, their partners, and the keepers of their history, Sujin explained, her eyes blazing brighter as ancient memories awakened in her inherited consciousness. But we were more than just caretakers. We were their children, carrying their blood in our veins, their power sleeping in our genes, waiting for the day when Earth would need its true protectors to awaken. The holographic images revealed the stunning truth that had been hidden in plain sight for millennia. Cave paintings that archaeologists had dismissed as primitive art were actually technical diagrams explaining how to maintain the cosmic barriers. Mythological stories weren't fiction, but detailed instruction manuals for future generations. Human bloodlines weren't purely human at all, but hybrid offspring of cosmic entities and early mankind. Every culture on Earth maintained these records in the form you so casually dismissed as myths and legends, Sujin said, her voice now carrying an authority that made even the most powerful world leaders bow their heads in respect. We preserved the knowledge of what slept beneath our feet, what ancient agreements governed our world, and most importantly, what would happen if those sacred compacts were ever broken. The building shook violently as something unimaginably large moved beneath the foundations of Manhattan. Through the reinforced windows, the assembled delegates could see figures of living myth walking calmly through Times Square. A Greek titan strode past yellow taxicabs, his footsteps causing reality to ripple around him like heat distortions on a summer day. The terms of the compact were beautifully simple, Sujin continued, her voice now carrying the full weight of 50,000 years of hidden history. The ancient powers would sleep peacefully until one of two conditions was met. Either humanity would evolve enough to join them as true equals in cosmic consciousness, or we would face a threat so great that their intervention was necessary to protect not just Earth, but the stability of local space-time itself. She turned to face Vexthul directly, her golden gaze making the alien's crystalline skin crack further under pressure he couldn't understand. Your arrival here, and your dismissive judgment of our supposedly primitive nature, has been interpreted by the sleeping powers as exactly such a threat, she said, with a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying. "You wanted to catalogue and classify human culture like specimens in a laboratory. Congratulations. You've just awakened the most dangerous and powerful entities in known space." The awakened entities had tried patience and explanation, but the aliens still didn't seem to understand the magnitude of what they were dealing with. It was time for a demonstration that would leave no room for doubt about the true nature of Earth's guardians. High above the planet, in the cold vacuum of space where nothing should be able to fly without mechanical propulsion, the Great Welsh Dragon approached the Confederation flagship with movements that defied every law of physics the aliens thought they understood. Its wings, each spanning the width of a small moon, didn't beat through empty space like a bird's wings through air. Instead, they manipulated gravitational fields themselves, bending the fabric of space-time to create currents that allowed impossible flight through the void. The Dragon's approach sent waves of terror through the alien crew. Their instruments screamed warnings about gravitational anomalies that shouldn't exist, while their eyes told them they were seeing something that violated the fundamental rules of reality. When the magnificent creature opened its mouth and roared, the sound didn't travel through the airless vacuum as vibrations. It traveled as gravitational waves that rippled through space itself. Every ship in the Confederation fleet began to ring like enormous bells struck by an invisible hammer. The carefully engineered hull plating, designed to withstand the harsh radiation of deep space and the impact of cosmic debris, started developing hairline cracks under stresses that their builders had never imagined possible. The very atoms of their ships were being shaken apart by forces that existed beyond their understanding of science. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the Norse god Thor stood atop a mountain peak in Norway, raising his legendary hammer Mjolnir toward the sky. But this wasn't the crude metal tool of human stories. It was a device that channeled the fundamental electromagnetic forces that hold atoms together and power the stars themselves. When Thor struck nothing but empty air with his cosmic weapon, the result was an electromagnetic pulse that traveled outward at the speed of light. The pulse was so powerful that it temporarily disabled every electronic device within 3 entire solar systems. Satellites went dark, space stations lost power, and even the most hardened military electronics fell silent as the wave of pure electromagnetic energy washed over them like a tsunami of invisible force. For a brief moment, entire star systems were plunged into technological darkness by the casual gesture of a single awakened god. On Earth, the Greek Titans began reshaping the planet itself with movements as simple as a gardener tending flowers. Poseidon, the ancient lord of the seas, gestured toward the Pacific Ocean, and new islands began rising from the depths like mountains being born. The massive displacement of water and rock should have triggered devastating tsunamis, but the Titan's power controlled every aspect of the process, creating new land masses without harming a single human being. Gaia, the living embodiment of Earth itself, caused entire mountain ranges to grow at rates visible to the naked eye. The Himalayas gained 1,000 feet of height in minutes, while new peaks burst from the ground in areas that had been perfectly flat moments before. The alterations to Earth's mass distribution were so significant that they changed the planet's orbital mechanics, forcing the Confederation's navigation computers to work frantically to recalculate their position as Earth's path through space shifted slightly. From his command ship, Vexthul watched in growing desperation as his proud civilization's most advanced technology proved utterly useless against beings that treated the laws of physics like gentle suggestions. His crystalline skin, now completely transparent with stress, reflected the chaotic light of failing systems around him. "Please," he transmitted toward Earth's surface, and the word felt strange coming from his translator. In all of recorded Confederation history, no member species had ever been forced to beg for mercy from a supposedly primitive world. "We meant no offense with our assessment protocols. We were simply following standard—" A voice answered him that seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the dragon floating beside his ship, from the gods reshaping continents below, from the awakened forests and ancient bloodlines that had finally revealed their true nature. When they spoke in unison, Their combined words carried the weight of cosmic authority. "Your protocols assume that power determines worth," the composite voice said, and despite its overwhelming magnitude, there was no anger in those tones, only the patient explanation of teachers addressing confused students. "You judge entire civilizations by their technology, their conquest of space, their ability to impose order on the chaos around them. But you have never encountered a species that chose to become gardeners and protectors of powers they could easily wield but preferred to contain for the greater good." The Confederation fleet suddenly found themselves held motionless in space, not by any visible restraining field or mechanical force, but by the simple fact that the awakened entities willed them to remain still. Their engines continued to function perfectly. Their controls responded normally, but the ships themselves refused to move, held in place by cosmic will that brooked no argument. "We are not humanity's servants or weapons," the voice continued, and now Vexthul could hear gentle amusement in those impossible harmonics. "We are their partners in stewardship of powers that could reshape galaxies. For 50,000 years, we have slept peacefully while they learned the most important lessons in the universe: wisdom, compassion, and the responsibility that comes with true power. They have proven themselves worthy guardians of secrets that could destroy or create entire star systems. Across the galaxy, automated survey teams that had been cataloging primitive worlds for decades began reporting readings that shattered their understanding of reality. Dragon sign detected on 17 different planets that had been dismissed as mythological. Energy signatures matching fictional gods appearing on 43 star systems previously classified as backward. Reality distortions manifesting around sites dedicated to powers the Confederation had assumed were imaginary, appearing across hundreds of systems that suddenly seemed far more dangerous and significant than anyone had realized. "Tell us," the unified voice asked, and the amusement was unmistakable now. "How many worlds have you dismissed as primitive without truly listening to their stories? How many mythologies have you catalogued as fantasies without considering that perhaps, just perhaps, myths might actually be history?" The most important meeting in galactic history was about to begin, and the Confederation Council chambers had never hosted guests quite like these. The vast circular room, normally filled only with the sophisticated technology and sterile atmosphere of advanced alien civilization, now buzzed with energies that made reality itself shimmer and bend at the edges. Dragons coiled gracefully around, floating star charts, their massive forms somehow fitting comfortably in spaces that should have been far too small. Ancient gods from human mythology examined galactic laws and treaties with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of entire star systems. The very air crackled with power that made the Council's most advanced equipment hum with warnings and wonder. Vexthul stood at the center of it all, his crystalline form still showing stress fractures from the overwhelming events of recent days. But where there had once been arrogant confidence in his bearing, now there was humility mixed with genuine scientific fascination. His entire understanding of the universe had been shattered and rebuilt in a matter of hours. "Honored entities," he began, his voice carrying none of its former dismissive tone, "we formally request a complete revision of all cultural assessment protocols used by the Confederation. We also offer our deepest and most sincere apologies for our presumption and ignorance regarding Earth's true nature." The great Welsh dragon, whose presence in orbit had terrified his entire fleet just days earlier, spoke with a voice like carefully controlled wildfire. "Your apologies are noted, but they are unnecessary. Your species learns by testing boundaries and challenging assumptions. We actually respect that approach when it is applied with proper wisdom and humility." Sujin stood nearby, no longer the quiet ethnologist who had once tried to explain her people's stories to dismissive aliens. The golden light that now emanated from her transformed features marked her as humanity's primary liaison between the mundane world and powers beyond imagination. She watched with satisfaction as new agreements were drafted that would change the course of galactic civilization forever. Earth's official status underwent a dramatic transformation in the Council records. No longer listed as a developing world seeking integration into galactic society, the planet was now classified as a guardian world, approached with appropriate reverence and respect. Humanity's role shifted overnight, from supplicants begging for acceptance to partners in the cosmic stewardship of powers that could reshape reality itself. Zeus, his divine form crackling with barely contained stellar energy that made the air around him glow with aurora-like colors, addressed the assembled council with authority that brooked no argument. There are new protocols that must be established immediately. Other worlds throughout this galaxy harbor sleeping powers similar to those you have awakened here. Other species guard ancient secrets that your previous assessments dismissed as primitive fantasies. The universe is far older, far more complex, and far more dangerous than your current scientific models suggest. New survey teams were hastily assembled. Unprecedented mixed crews combining alien technology specialists, human cultural experts, and awakened entities whose very presence could detect sleeping powers across vast distances. Their mission would be to revisit every single world that had been classified as hosting primitive mythological cultures and determine what cosmic truths might be hidden beneath legends that had been carelessly dismissed. Dr. Hyunwoo Nam, the linguistics professor from Seoul National University, who had first tried to record Halmoni Yoon's impossible languages, found himself appointed to a position that would have seemed like a joke just weeks earlier. As the Confederation's first Director of Mythological Verification, he now held one of the most crucial posts in galactic civilization, with reality-warping entities serving as his personal advisors. The universe contains wonders and terrors beyond your current understanding, Sujin told the assembled delegates, her inherited nature now fully awakened as golden light that made her words carry across space-time itself. Humanity has spent 50,000 years learning to be worthy guardians of such cosmic forces. Perhaps it's time for the rest of the galaxy to learn the same wisdom that comes with true responsibility. As the Confederation fleet prepared to depart from Earth's orbit, their departure looked nothing like their arrogant arrival weeks earlier. Now they traveled as honored allies, escorted by entities of living myth. Dragons whose wings could span solar systems, gods whose footsteps could shake planets, and forest guardians whose songs could grow new worlds from cosmic dust. Reports began flooding in from across known space as automated monitoring systems detected phenomena that had been dismissed for decades. The primitive mythology of the Altair system included detailed references to sleeping giants, and deep space sensors were now detecting massive biosignatures buried beneath that system's largest planet. The fictional fire spirits of Proxima Centauri were showing energy signatures that perfectly matched the awakened Earth dragons. Most disturbing of all, the impossible dreamwalkers of the Vega colonies, beings that supposedly existed only in local folklore, were beginning to manifest in physical reality. The galaxy was waking up, and the implications were staggering. Humanity, once considered the newest and least significant applicants for cosmic citizenship, now found themselves in the role of teachers. They were tasked with sharing the most important lesson in the universe, that true wisdom lies not in dismissing the impossible, but in learning to approach mystery with appropriate respect and reverence. In her traditional Hanok house, now officially designated as Earth's first embassy to awakened powers, Sujin opened her grandmother's ancient leather journal to discover something that made her gasp with wonder. New words were appearing on pages that had been blank just moments before, written in languages that predated human civilization by millions of years. These were instructions for the next phase of cosmic evolution, guidance written by entities that had been patiently waiting 50,000 years for the galaxy to grow wise enough to read and understand them. The age of dismissed myths and arrogant assumptions was finally ending. The age of partnership with the impossible, of cooperation between mortal civilizations and cosmic powers, had officially begun. And at the center of it all, humanity stood ready to guide the galaxy toward a future where legends lived alongside. Reality and wisdom was valued more than mere technological advancement.